We've got some source material here, mainly from an English learning video, that focuses on a specific technique for fluency.
Yeah, and it sounds potentially like a real game changer, especially for, sounding more natural and just keeping up when people are talking.
Definitely. It tackles those common frustrations, the
Yeah.
pronunciation hurdles, getting the rhythm right, feeling like conversations just fly past you.
So our goal here, our mission for this deep dive is to unpack this method. It's called shadowing, right?
That's the one. Shadowing.
Okay. So we want to dig into what the source says about it, understand how it's supposed to work, and see if it can really genuinely transform speaking and listening skills. We're going to pull out the key insights.
And the source is quite practical, which is great. It doesn't just stay theoretical.
Exactly. That's what caught my eye. It offers real examples, things you can actually do. So we'll explore those too.
Sounds like a plan.
All right, so let's start right at the beginning. Based on our source material, what is shadowing? And maybe more importantly, why does the source claim it's so effective?
Okay, so the source defines shadowing pretty simply. It's basically listening to a native English speaker
Right.
and then repeating what they say almost immediately after them, like an echo.
An echo.
Yeah.
So not waiting for them to finish the whole sentence, you're talking almost over them or right behind.
Right behind is a good way to put it. You're literally trying to mirror them in real time, maybe a split-second delay.
Okay, wow. That sounds challenging.
It can be at first, but the source explains why this immediate repetition is so powerful. It's about training your brain.
How so?
Well, it helps connect the sound of English words and phrases directly to their meaning. It sort of bypasses that intermediate step where you might mentally translate from your native language.
I see. So instead of hearing, how are you?
Hmm.
Thinking, okay, how means X, R means Y, U means Z, and then constructing the meaning.
Exactly. You hear the sound chunk, how are you? And your brain learns to instantly link that sound to the concept, the greeting. It builds automaticity.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's like you're learning the language as chunks of sound and meaning, not just individual words to be a song.
Precisely. And the source argues this is fundamental for achieving real fluency, that ability to speak and understand without constant mental translation.
Does the source highlight other specific benefits from doing this echoing thing?
Oh, absolutely. It's positioned as, well, one of the most effective ways to tackle several key areas. Pronunciation is a big one.
Because you're mimicking a native speaker's sounds
But-
directly.
Exactly. You're training your mouth to make the sounds correctly. But also, rhythm and intonation, the sort of musicality of English, shadowing helps you pick that up naturally.
And speaking speed, too, I imagine, if you're keeping up with a native speaker.
Yes, definitely. It encourages you to speak at a more natural pace rather than, slowly and deliberately forming each word in isolation.
So it's really hitting the practical mechanics of how English sounds when spoken naturally.
It really is. Think of it as practical training for both your mouth and your brain working together.
Okay, that's a compelling why. But you said it could be challenging. If someone's listening and thinking, wow, how do I even start that?
Yeah.
What does the source recommend? How do you begin without getting totally overwhelmed?
Yeah, good question. And the source is very clear on this. Start small. Really small.
Like, don't try to shadow a whole news report on day one.
Definitely not. No, the advice is to focus on short phrases first. Common sentences. Things you'd actually use or hear in everyday life.
Okay, manageable chunks.
Exactly. And another really important point the source makes is about perfection. Don't aim for it, especially at the start.
Right, so it's not about getting every single word perfect immediately.
Not at all. The goal initially is more about matching the overall sound, the rhythm, and the tone of the speaker, trying to capture the feel of how they're speaking.
So rhythm and tone are more important than perfect grammar, at least when you're starting out.
That's what the source emphasizes, yes.
Mm-hmm.
The idea seems to be that if you internalize the natural flow and melody of the language first, the grammar structures will actually start to feel more natural and intuitive later on. You kind of absorb them through the sound patterns.
Interesting, like learning the music before analyzing the notes.
That's a great analogy. Yeah. And speaking of doing it, the source is incredibly firm on one point. You absolutely must do it out loud.
Okay. No silent shadowing in your head.
No. They explicitly say it won't work nearly as well. You need to physically speak. The source uses this comparison. Shadowing is like going to the gym, but for your voice and mouth.
Right. You can't build muscle just by thinking about lifting weights. You have to actually do the reps.
Precisely. Your mouth, your tongue, your jaw, they all need the physical practice to get used to forming these English sounds fluidly. Speaking out loud is what builds that muscle memory.
And it probably reinforces that sound meaning connection we talked about earlier too, right? Hearing yourself say it.
Absolutely. It closes the loop. You hear the native speakers, you produce the sound yourself, you hear your own voice making the sound. It solidifies the whole process.
Okay, so start small, focus on rhythm and tone, and definitely speak out loud.
Got it. Now, you mentioned using everyday language. The source gives some concrete examples based on daily routines, right?
Yes, and that's a really smart approach because it immediately gives you relevant content. You don't have to search for something random.
What kind of routines do they use?
Well, the first simple exercise is built around a typical morning routine. The source provides sample sentences you can shadow, like, I wake up at 7 in the morning,
Okay.
I brush my teeth and wash my face,
Simple action.
then I make a cup of tea, just basic sequential actions that most people do.
And the idea is to listen to someone saying that naturally and just echo it.
Exactly. Listen, echo, listen, echo. And then, interestingly, the source suggests that once you get comfortable with the basic shadowing,
You should try repeating it faster. Push yourself a bit on the speed to get closer to a natural conversational pace.
so building speed and naturalness progressively.
Right. It's not just about accuracy, but also fluency. They offer another example, too, focusing on, say, getting ready for work or school.
Okay, like what?
Sentences like, I put on my clothes and pack my bag, or I check if I have everything I need, keys, wallet, phone. Again, very practical stuff.
It seems incredibly useful to practice language that's tied directly to actions you perform every single day.
It really is. Because you're constantly reinforcing it. You practice shadowing, I brush my teeth, and then later you actually brush your teeth. Maybe the phrase pops into your head. It makes the language much more sticky and usable.
It's functional. You know you're learning something you will actually use.
That's the key. It avoids that feeling of learning abstract phrases you might never need.
But, conversations aren't just about listing actions or facts. There's feeling, there's emotion. Does the source address that aspect?
It does, and this is where it gets really interesting, I think. The source makes a great point that it's not just what you say, but how you say it. The feeling matters.
So applying shadowing to capture tone and emotion.
Precisely. They introduce this idea of adding emotion, tone, and feeling to your shadowing practice. They move beyond just shadowing factual statements.
How does that work in practice? What's the example?
Well, they use the example of talking to a friend about your morning. Instead of just shadowing the factual, I woke up at 7, I made tea.
Right.
You shadow a version that conveys a feeling. Like, imagine someone saying, oh, my morning was really calm today. You try to capture that calm tone.
Okay.
Or maybe, I woke up early and had such a quiet cup of tea. The sun was shining. Everything just felt peaceful. You're not just echoing the words. You're trying to echo the energy, the peacefulness in their voice.
Ah, I see. So you're mimicking the emotional contour of the speech, not just the linguistic one.
Exactly. You're trying to match the feeling. And the benefit, according to the source, is huge. It helps you sound much more natural, much less robotic.
Because real people use tone to convey meaning all the time.
All the time. And practicing this helps you start to feel the language more deeply, not just understand it intellectually. It also makes you better at expressing your own emotions clearly when you speak English.
That makes sense. It connects the language to human experience, which is vital for genuine communication.
Couldn't agree more. It's about connecting, not just transmitting information.
Okay, so we've got routines, we've got emotions. The source then seems to shift gears slightly and talks about using stories for shadowing practice. Why stories?
Stories are a really powerful tool for language learning, and the source highlights a few reasons why they work well with shadowing.
What's the main benefit?
Well, stories, by their nature, are made up of connected sentences and ideas. They have a flow, a narrative arc. Shadowing stories trains your brain to think and process English in these longer stretches, these connected thoughts.
Rather than just isolated phrases or sentences.
Exactly. It helps you move beyond just word level or sentence level processing towards understanding and producing connected discourse, like how we actually talk and listen.
And I imagine it helps with memory, too. Stories are often more memorable than random lists.
Absolutely. You're remembering phrases, vocabulary, and sentence patterns within a meaningful context, which makes them stick better. The narrative provides hooks for your memory.
Does the source give specific examples of stories to shadow?
Yeah, they keep it simple and relatable. One example is a basic story about going to the grocery store.
Okay.
Something like, yesterday I went to the grocery store. I made a list before leaving the house because I always forget something if I don't.
Relatable.
I needed milk, eggs, bread, and maybe some fruit. You're following this simple sequence of events, shadowing the language used to describe it.
So you're practicing narrative language, sequence words.
Yes, words like then, after that, before, because. And they give another example, maybe a bit more descriptive, like visiting a cousin in the countryside.
Right, I remember seeing that one.
Yeah, like, last weekend I visited my cousin who lives out in the countryside. The train ride was really peaceful, actually. I just looked out the window. When I got there, we spent the afternoon walking through the fields.
It paints more of a picture.
It does. And shadowing that kind of descriptive narrative helps you practice using adjectives, describing scenes, expressing feelings about experiences. It provides a richer context than just single sentences.
So stories are good for practicing connected thought and more descriptive language.
Definitely. They give your brain more structure to latch onto, and they naturally incorporate the connecting words and phrases that make speech flow smoothly.
Okay, that makes sense. Routines, emotions, stories. These are all great practice grounds. But the source also gets very specific about practicing for actual conversations, right? Preparing for real-life interactions.
Yes, this is a really practical application of shadowing, using it almost like rehearsing for common dialogues.
How does that work?
Well, one simple way the source suggests is shadowing basic question and answer pairs, things you hear constantly. Like shadowing both sides of, how are you today? Followed immediately by, I'm doing well, thank you, or what time is it now? Followed by, it's 10:30 in the morning.
So you're practicing both asking and answering common questions.
Exactly. And again, the source advises trying to speed these up once you're comfortable. The goal is quick recall and a natural-sounding response, not having to hesitate and think every time someone asks you the time.
That seems really useful for building conversational reflexes.
It is, but they take it further, suggesting you shadow entire imagined situations or mini-scripts for common scenarios.
Oh, interesting. Like role-playing with yourself through shadowing.
Kind of, yeah. They provide examples for all sorts of everyday situations you might encounter as an English speaker. Think about being in a restaurant. You could shadow phrases like, hello, I'd like a table for one, please, or could I see the menu, please? And later, could I have the check, please?
So you're practicing the specific language chunks you need in that context.
Right. Precisely. Or at a grocery store. Hi, do you have any fresh apples today? Excuse me, where can I find the eggs? How much is the total?
It's like preloading your brain with the right phrases.
That's a good way to put it. They even cover scenarios like meeting someone new,
Oh, yeah.
shadowing a simple exchange like, hello, it's nice to meet you. What's your name? My name is Natasha. It's nice to meet you too. Where are you from? I'm from Canada.
Practicing those initial pleasantries.
Yes, or even slightly more emotional scenarios like meeting a friend after a long time. Hey, it's so good to see you again. How have you been? I know, it feels like ages. I've missed our long conversations, capturing that warmth.
They seem to cover a lot of ground. What about things like phone calls or more formal situations?
Yeah, included too. Shadowing basic phone etiquette. Hello, this is Natasha speaking. Hi, Natasha. It's David calling. Is now a good time?
Okay.
And even snippets relevant to, say, a job interview. Good morning. Thank you for coming in today. Thank you for having me. So can you tell me a little about yourself?
Wow, that could really help reduce anxiety in those situations if you've practiced the flow.
That's the idea. Or giving directions. Excuse me, can you tell me how to get to the train station? Sure. You need to walk straight for about 2 blocks, then turn left.
So, by shadowing these specific practical dialogues provided in the source, you're essentially building a mental library of ready-to-use language for a whole range of real-life situations.
Exactly. It dramatically lowers the cognitive load when you're actually in that situation. You've already rehearsed the key phrases and the conversational flow through shadowing. It helps reduce that, panic.
Yeah, that hesitation can really break the flow of a conversation.
It really can. Shadowing helps bridge that gap.
Now, something I noticed when you were listing those examples, it feels like you're practicing specific grammar points without even realizing it. Is that part of the design, according to the source?
That's a really astute observation, and yes, the source suggests this is a key, almost stealthy benefit of shadowing. You're absorbing grammar in context.
So instead of a textbook saying, learn the verb to be, you just shadow lots of sentences using it naturally.
Precisely. The source doesn't frame it as grammar practice. It frames it as shadowing common situations. But within those situations, you naturally encounter and practice key structures. Like the verb to be, you'd shadow I am happy, you are my friend, she's at work, they were here yesterday. You just absorb the pattern through repetition.
You internalize the pattern without necessarily analyzing the rule first.
Exactly. It's more implicit learning. The source shows this for lots of structures. For instance, practicing the present continuous tense by shadowing descriptions of ongoing actions.
Like the example.
I'm walking down the street right now and I'm enjoying the sunshine. People are smiling, cars are driving by. You're practicing that ing form in a natural context, linking it to the idea of happening now.
Okay. And what about other tenses, like future plans?
Same principle. You shadow sentences about the future. Tomorrow I'm going to start my day early. Or next week I plan to clean my room. You practice going to and will naturally by shadowing plans.
Does it extend to more complex grammar, too?
Apparently so. The source includes examples even for things like conditional sentences, expressing possibilities, or hypothetical situations.
Oh, like if clauses.
Yeah, shadowing things like, if I had more time, I would travel the world, or if it rains tomorrow, we'll stay inside. You get comfortable with the structure and rhythm of these conditional forms.
That's quite sophisticated grammar to be picking up through mimicry.
It is, but the idea is that hearing and repeating the pattern makes it feel less intimidating and more intuitive to use. You're not just learning rules, you're learning the sound and shape of the structure.
And beyond tenses and conditionals, does it help with other aspects, like descriptions or specific functions?
Yes, the source suggests shadowing is great for building descriptive vocabulary and fluency. You might shadow descriptions of places. The room is bright and clean with large windows overlooking the garden. A comfortable sofa sits against one wall.
So you're learning adjectives and how to put them together?
Exactly. Or practicing specific conversational functions, like how to express needs or make requests politely. Could you possibly help me with this, please? I need some assistance with my luggage.
Or even expressing opinions.
Right. Shadowing examples of agreement. Yes, I completely agree with your point. Or disagreement. I'm not so sure about that. Or giving advice, you should really try reading more English books. It might help to join a conversation club.
So shadowing these targeted examples seems like a really efficient way to get comfortable using all these different structures and expressions naturally, almost absorbing them through sound and context, rather than feeling like you're slogging through a grammar textbook.
That's the core idea. It makes grammar functional, alive. You're connecting the structure directly to its sound, its meaning, and its typical use in conversation.
Okay, this is all very focused on language output and structure. But then the source takes a turn that I found quite surprising, suggesting using shadowing for personal reflection and mindset. How does that work?
Yeah, that's a fascinating extension of the technique. It's about turning the practice inward, using English not just to communicate with others, but for your own internal thoughts and feelings.
So shadowing things you might think to yourself.
Exactly. The source gives examples related to reflecting on your day. You might shadow sentences like, okay, today was actually a pretty productive day. I managed to finish those tasks I'd been putting off. Or reflecting on today, I feel good. I completed my English practice session this morning, and I even went for a nice walk later.
So you're basically practicing thinking in English about your own life, using past tenses naturally to describe completed actions.
Precisely. It helps you get comfortable narrating your own experiences in English, even just internally. And it goes beyond reflection. The source suggests using it for planning, too.
Planning the next day, maybe?
Yes, shadowing sentences like, okay, tomorrow I plan to wake up early, maybe 6:30, and go for a run before work. Or, tomorrow I will definitely practice my English shadowing for at least 30 minutes.
So you're practicing future tenses, but also kind of programming yourself for success by verbalizing your intentions in English?
That seems to be the idea. It helps solidify plans and visualize future actions using the target language. But then there's the mindset piece, which is really powerful.
This is the confidence building part.
Yes. The source suggests shadowing positive affirmations or statements about your learning journey. Things like, I can speak English fluently. I am improving every single day.
Wow. Saying those out loud, mimicking a confident tone, I can see how that could have an effect.
Or shadowing more reflective statements about the process. I believe that learning a language takes time and patience, and that's okay. Or, I am proud of the progress I'm making, even if it feels small sometimes.
So it's using the physical act of shadowing, the repetition, the mimicry, to reinforce positive beliefs about your own abilities and the learning process itself.
Exactly. The source frames it as a way to build confidence alongside the language skills. You're using the tool not just for external language production, but for shaping your internal dialogue and mindset in English.
That's a really holistic view. It acknowledges that learning a language isn't just about grammar and vocab, it's also about psychology, confidence, and feeling comfortable in the language.
Which is often overlooked, isn't it? That feeling of comfort and confidence is a huge part of genuine fluency. Being okay with thinking and reflecting in the language.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've covered a ton. Speaking mechanics, pronunciation, rhythm, vocabulary, grammar implicitly, real-world conversations, even mindset.
Huh?
But let's circle back to something we touched on earlier. Listening skills. How does shadowing, which is primarily a speaking practice, end up improving your listening comprehension so much, according to the source?
That's a great question, and the source makes a very strong connection here. The argument is that effective listening isn't just about, recognizing the dictionary definition of individual words as they fly by.
Right. There's more to it than that.
Much more. Real comprehension involves catching the rhythm, the intonation patterns, the pauses, the way words blend together, the stress on certain syllables, the emotional tone, all those nuances that native speakers use to convey meaning beyond the literal words.
The musicality again, the prosody of the language.
Exactly, the prosody.
Yeah.
And shadowing forces you to pay incredibly close attention to precisely those features, because you're trying to copy the exact sound, the exact tone, the exact rhythm, the exact pauses, even the exact emotion of the speaker you're shadowing.
You have to notice all those things first. You can't copy what you don't perceive.
Precisely. You are actively training your ear to become highly sensitive to these subtle but crucial elements of spoken English. You're learning to decode the acoustic signal much more effectively.
So it's like you're building a detailed internal map of how natural English actually sounds, at a level much deeper than just individual words.
That's a perfect way to describe it. You become intimately familiar with the common sound patterns, the intonation contours, the way sounds link and change in connected speech.
And the source mentioned practicing with different feelings.
Yeah.
How does that play into listening?
Well, when you consciously practice shadowing the same phrase but with different emotions, say shadowing "I'm so happy," spoken with genuine excitement versus mild contentment, you're not just changing your own voice, you're training your ear to recognize the specific acoustic cues that signal excitement versus contentment in English.
Ah, so you learn to pick up on those subtle tonal shifts when you hear other people speak.
Exactly. You become better at interpreting the speaker's attitude and intention, which is crucial for full comprehension.
So, this improved, fine-grained recognition of sound patterns, rhythm, and tone directly translates into better listening comprehension overall.
That's the direct link the source makes. By learning to produce these nuances accurately through shadowing, you simultaneously become much better at perceiving and understanding them when you listen to others in real-time conversations or when listening to media.
It makes you a more attuned, a more sensitive, more accurate listener because you've essentially reverse engineered the sounds yourself.
You've got it. You've gone through the process of creating those sounds, so recognizing them becomes easier.
Okay, so looking back at everything the source presents, from the basic definition to these nuanced applications for listening and mindset, what's the big picture? What's the ultimate takeaway message about shadowing?
I think the core message is about the cumulative power of consistent practice. The source really hammers home that shadowing, if done regularly, is arguably one of the single most effective techniques available to an English learner.
Effective for that whole suite of schools we discussed.
Yes, pronunciation, rhythm, intonation, naturalness, reducing hesitation, building confidence, and significantly boosting listening comprehension. It hits so many targets at once.
And a key part of its power seems to be its accessibility, right?
Absolutely. The source emphasizes you don't need fancy equipment or expensive classes. You just need a source of native English speech, which could be anything from, podcasts like this, to YouTube videos, movies, audiobooks, news reports, even just reading a text out loud yourself and trying to give it a natural rhythm and flow, then repeating. You can do it anywhere, anytime, with readily available materials.
So the barrier to entry is quite low, but the potential payoff is high.
That's the gist. The message is clear. The more you integrate shadowing into your learning routine, whether it's daily or several times a week, the more fluent, confident, and crucially natural your English is going to sound and feel.
It's about consistency then. Even short bursts of practice add up.
Definitely. It's like exercise. You might not see dramatic results after one session, but stick with it and the progress becomes undeniable. The source really encourages learners to trust the process, keep practicing every day, even if it's just for 10-15 minutes, progress will happen.
Even if the steps feel small day to day.
Exactly. Those small steps accumulate into significant improvements in how you speak and understand English over time. It's presented as a simple technique, maybe deceptively simple, but with a really profound potential impact.
So, to wrap up our deep dive based on this source material, shadowing emerges as this incredibly versatile technique. It's not just about mimicking sounds.
No, it's far more than that. It's about fundamentally retraining your brain and your mouth to work together in sync with the patterns of native English speech.
Improving the core mechanics of pronunciation and rhythm.
Building that essential confidence to speak.
Enhancing your ability to convey and understand nuance and emotion.
Preparing you practically for real-world conversations and situations.
And, maybe surprisingly, directly sharpening your listening skills by tuning your ear to the subtleties of the language.
It's presented as this really accessible yet powerful tool. That vocal gym analogy seems quite fitting. You're actively training your production and perception simultaneously.
It really is a compelling picture. And it leaves us with a final thought, perhaps. Thinking about this core idea from the source, learning through intense repetition and mimicry, copying the sounds, the rhythms, the very cadence of others.
Yeah, treating your voice like it's physically adapting to match this external model.
Does that kind of deep mimicry, that gym for your voice, do more than just build language skills? Could consistently adopting these sonic patterns and maybe even the embedded emotional rhythms of English day after day through shadowing, could that subtly start to shape how you perceive things or how you connect with the cultural nuances carried within the language itself?
That's a fascinating question. Does embodying the sounds change the listener? It's certainly something interesting for you to ponder as you potentially start your own shadowing practice.